Hey South Hills, today I just want to take a moment and celebrate what God has been doing with our church. About a year ago, we launched South Hills Manhattan Beach. And it was the beginning of a journey of what God only knew what was going to come. And so we went from 8 people to the start of this Manhattan Beach campus to 375 on their 1 year anniversary. And I want to give Brian an opportunity to share a little bit of the wins that have been happening in the last year.
It's been pretty incredible. I'm just thinking of all the families that I've talked to that have invited somebody from their family that have never been to church. Really, the key factor right now is the community that's happening outside the building. Everybody sticks around in the conversations that are happening. You'll see a table of 2 families, and they're 2 families that don't know each other. They're not friends. They didn't come together. They just sat down at a table. Another family ended up sitting there, and they have this conversation that turns into a relationship. I'm thinking of the people who've been baptized, and we've had 2 little ones that were both 8 years old. I was baptized when I was 8 years old. And when I saw these little ones that wanted to be baptized, it just reminded me of all the amazing things that God has done in my life, but that He's going to do in their lives. I mean, I can't tell you how many families have shared that their kids just never want to leave. We're finding so many that were not raised in church, and their kids are just so bought in. They're like, this is just amazing. Like, my family has a church that every one of us, from the littlest one, to me and my wife or whatever it might be, that they're all experiencing church together. And I think that's what we're called to do.
These are stories we hear at all of our campuses, but it has been unreal to see what God has been doing through South Hills Manhattan Beach. So South Hills Manhattan Beach, a huge shout out to you. All of our campuses today are celebrating you.
So one of the things I absolutely love about our church and our campus in particularly is that we have so many different people that are all at different places and different stages in their life. We have junior high and high school students. We have stay-at-home moms. We have people with careers. We have some people who are retired. We have people who are in between jobs. We have full-time college students. We have entrepreneurs. We have business owners, and everybody in between. And so as we begin a conversation today about our work, no matter where you're at on the spectrum of employment or where you're at on that, that career path, whatever that looks like for you in this stage of your life, all of the stuff that we're going to be talking about in this series, I promise you, I guarantee you, it applies to you, no matter how you would describe where you're at currently with work. And you might not realize it, but you have a theology. No matter what you think about God or faith or the Bible or how long you've spent in church or how much time you haven't spent in church, you have a theology, a system of beliefs about God and about you and the way that the world works. Even if that system is there isn't a God, you have a theology. And that includes what you think about work and career and money and retirement and meaning and purpose. And the truth is, most of us tend to separate our lives into 2 different categories. We have the things that are sacred, those things that are spiritual, those things that have to do with God, those things that are, that have to do with our faith, whether it's the Bible and prayer and church and all that stuff. And then we have just kind of the stuff that could just be labeled the secular. There's the spiritual part, and there's just our real lives. It's just everything else. It's money and work and school and schedules and family and all that stuff. And if that's you, if you are somebody that sort of has that sort of separation in your mind, it may seem strange to you that we would talk about things like money and budgeting or sex or mental health or work at church. But for God, that separation doesn't exist. And so all of life and all the parts of your life are actually connected. And so for us, that's why we spend so much time at our church here on Sunday mornings having conversations that actually apply to what your life looks like on Monday morning, not just on Sunday morning. That the conversations we have together when we gather together as a church family on Sundays actually have relevance to what's going on when the alarm goes off and the routine kicks in on Monday. Now, the truth is, we have a complicated relationship with work in our culture. And it starts when you're young. So I have 4 kids. I was having a conversation with my kids once about just chores and responsibility. And they were kind of whining and complaining, like especially like when this time of year when school would get out and they're heading into vacation and they just want to lounge around and not doing, third grade was a beast, man. I need 3 months off. And so they would just be whining and complaining. And for me, I was always like, I know it's such a huge burden for me to interrupt your busy schedule of laying around and playing video games and eating all day, but Mom and I have actually worked all day, and all I'm asking you to do is this one thing. All I'm asking you to do is help out a little bit. And I'll never forget, my oldest son said to me one time, Dad, it seems like all you do is work all day, every day. And I was like, well, yeah, that's kind of what the deal is when you're a grown-up. And without missing a beat, and he's like, and that's why I don't ever want to be a grown-up. And that's how we think as kids, right? Like the problem is though that as we begin to grow up, we want stuff, right? And so we want stuff that we don't have money for. And so our thought process around work starts off as, I don't have money, but I want stuff. So I guess I'll go work so that I can get money so that I can buy stuff. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that thought process. In fact, it's better than some of the alternatives, which is like, I want stuff, but I don't want to work, so I'm going to go take other people's stuff, right? Or I want stuff and I don't want to work, so I'm just going to live off of other people, right? Those are not great alternatives. So it's not a bad place to start, but oftentimes we don't really move past it as we grow up. As we get older, we just have a more sophisticated, sort of bigger scale version of, I want stuff, so I'm going to go to work so I can get money so I can buy that stuff. Now, of course, there's other ambitions and motivations that sort of get mixed in there as we get older, but it's still the basis so often for how we approach work in our lives. And it's not really a great way to build a deep, meaningful, rewarding, fulfilling life. Now, obviously, we're not all the same. We're not all on the same stage or on the same page. So when it comes to work, like the truth is, like, some people who only want to do jobs that don't feel like work. Most of them are under the age of, say, like 30. And sometimes the conversation is like, yeah, I'll do anything as long as it's fun all the time and nobody tells me what to do. And there's no expectations of when I need to show up, and there's lots of perks, and the feedback is always really positive and encouraging, and you're just like, wait, are we talking about a job or a party? Like, what are you talking about? At the same time, we also know people who absolutely hate their jobs, right? They completely dread it. They're in a bad mood when they go in, and they're in a worse mood when they get off, and they're always complaining about it. It's literally... that job is just a means to an end, and the end is getting paid and getting off work so that they can go do something that they actually like, which like probably drink, right? And so it's an endless cycle of thank God it's Friday, oh God it's Monday. Thank God it's Friday, oh God it's Monday. Thank God it's Friday, oh God it's Monday. And the truth is, like, I get it. Like, we all have to do things that we hate sometimes. I've shared before, like, I was working at a church some years ago in Las Vegas as the youth pastor, and it was a really super dysfunctional situation, and there was a lot of crazy stuff that happened, and I unexpectedly got let go from the church. And so it was, the good news is it was only 3 weeks before Christmas. And so I was like, I don't know what to do, and so I just took the very first job that I could find. It wasn't like in the job market today where people were begging anybody and everyone, like, you're alive, you'll show up, we'll pay you. It wasn't like that. So I took this job, and it was the title of it was risk management, and really it was just about collecting debts. It was just a debt collector. And so I would sit on the phone all day and call people who had credit card debt, who were delinquent on their credit card debt, and try to get them to make payments to their credit card. And it was the most miserable job I've ever done. It was so, I hated that every second of it. So I get it. Like, we have to do things sometimes that we don't want to do. But while some of us are always trying to get out of work, others of us do almost nothing but work. Have you ever known someone, or are you related to someone who's a workaholic, right? People who aren't just driven, but they need to make that sale, or they need to finish that project, or they need the bonus or the promotion. And their whole life is about pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing for that achievement and respect and validation. And even when it's taking its toll on their relationships or their health, they just can't bring themselves to slow down. They are earning a living, and maybe even a really good one, but it's coming at the expense of their actual life. Now, the truth is, most of us probably fall somewhere in the middle of those three scenarios. But no matter where you're at on that spectrum, the problem is when you think about how much time you spend at work, this isn't something, or you will spend at work if you're not currently working, this isn't something that we can afford to mess up. I mean, let's just say like the average lifespan is 75 years. Let's say you're going to live 75 years. Some of us, that window is closing, right? Like if that's the case. But the prime of your adult life will be the 40 years between 25 and 65. And in that 40 years, you're going to spend roughly 12 of them sleeping if you just average 7 hours a night. So that leaves about 28 years of your life in the prime of your life. And if you work an average of 40 hours a week during that time, you will have spent 10 solid years of your life working. And if you're one of those people that works, closer to 50 hours a week, it bumps up to 15 years. And so if you just work full time, you will spend between a third and a half of your waking hours in the prime of your life at your job doing work. Which means that this is something that you really can't afford to hate or mess up. It's something that's worth talking about and thinking about and getting right. In James chapter 4, verse 14, Jesus' half-brother writes these words. He says, "Our life is like the morning fog. It's here for a little while, and then it's just gone." See, life is too short for you to waste your work. Still, there's the tension, right? Because we can't escape the whole money part of it. I mean, at the end of the day, you got bills to pay, and nobody's going to pay them for you. And so we think like we could all just do something really meaningful and beautiful and fulfilling with our lives if we didn't need the money, and so we didn't have to work. I mean, isn't that what we're all sort of working towards for the end of our life? That we would make a big enough pile of money to not have to work ever again. And then we could create our own little paradise, and it would just be kind of like being on permanent vacation. I was talking to a friend actually in the last couple of weeks, and he was telling me about a conversation. He had lunch with his grandma. And he was asking his grandma, he said, "Grandma, what do you do? What do you do all day?" And she said, "Whatever I want to." And he was like, "Wow, that sounds amazing." And she's like, "But honestly, it's actually kind of a hell." And she got really like sad. And she said, "You can only sleep in so many days and watch so much TV and putz around your house for so long." She said, "I'm not even sure what my life is about right now." And when he told me that story, I thought, isn't it confusing for us when we realize that so many people arrive at the place that we spend all of our time and all of our life trying to get to, and then it's not what we thought it was. It's not what they thought it was, and they're miserable. Whether that's retirement or having the right career or the right job or making the right amount of money or having the right amount of freedom. And it's even crazier for us when you meet somebody who's completely happy and completely satisfied doing something that you would never do for far less money than you would ever think about taking. So, wait a minute. What does all this even mean? Well, like I said, we have a really complicated relationship with work. And part of it is that we tend to connect our worth with our work. And since especially in our culture, we see certain types of work as being worth more, it means that you have more worth if you're doing those jobs. I mean, there's something about what we do that we think tells the story of who we are, whether we want it to or not. I mean, that is, when you meet someone, it's one of the first questions that gets asked. What do you do? What we're really saying is, how do you make your money? But God actually paints a very different picture of what work is in the scriptures than the one that we inherit from our culture. In fact, in the opening scene of the scriptures, they begin with God creating and working, and he's building a paradise. And what's interesting is, right after he builds this paradise and right after he creates humanity, he puts them to work. Check it out in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. It says, so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish in the sea and in the birds of the sky and all the animals that scurry along the ground. I mean, think about this. That God creates the world where everything is perfect and everything is just as he intended it to be. Sin has not yet entered the story, and yet here they are working. If you're a person of faith, or if you're a person of the Bible, if you're somebody that's attended church, we often think about work as that was the thing that God cursed humanity with because we sinned, but it's not. Because before sin even happened, he actually gives them a job to do. See, God's idea of paradise is very different from ours. His actually involves us working. So he tells them, be fruitful, fill the earth, subdue or govern over it, reign over it. Those things are actually their job description that he gives to them. And so he's essentially saying to them, look, I'm done with creating, but creation isn't finished. Let's make something together from what I've created. I purposefully left the job unfinished because I want to work on finishing it with you. And so he tells them to get busy making babies. And they were like, can do. But that wasn't the only part of it. He says, fill the earth. And that wasn't just about making more human beings. He was talking about crafting and creating civilizations and societies and cultures. He instructs them to create and innovate and organize. He says to govern and subdue the earth, literally to tame what's wild and to bring order out of chaos. And finally, he tells them that they are to reign over the earth, or to partner with God in taking the world somewhere. Notice that he doesn't tell them that the earth doesn't matter and that it's only there to be exploited and used for their own desires. But he also doesn't tell them to leave it alone, that it's too sacred for them to do anything with it, to leave it untouched or unused. What's clear from the beginning is that we're supposed to enjoy it, but we're also supposed to use it, to make something out of it, to move it around, to rearrange it, and to make things better. That's what work is in the mind of God. There's a stewardship, a responsibility that he gives to them for them to do. See, work isn't just about earning money. It's about channeling your creativity and your effort and your energy and the best of who you are into helping people and the world thrive and flourish. It isn't your job per se. It includes your job for sure, but it's so much bigger than that. The work that God has for you in your life actually predates you being old enough to get a job, and it goes way beyond your retirement years. And it's this idea that's at the heart of why loving your work has very little to do with how much money you make or what you do for a living or how prestigious or cool or fun your job or your role is or what your title is. And if there's one sort of big driving idea for this whole series, it would be this. If you hit the cultural bullseye for work, but you miss the creators, you will always, always, always feel aimless and empty, no matter how big a pile of cash you come into. Something will always be missing. But if you hit the creator's bullseye, you will be fulfilled no matter what the culture says and no matter what job you're doing. And why? because it's the way that God designed you and me, and because you're made in his image. Have you ever just stopped to think about that part of Genesis chapter 1? Right, the picture or the image of God that we get when we read the story. Yes, when we're first introduced to God, he's creating, but he's also working. He's also doing manual labor. Like he plants and tends to a garden. He's hand making human beings out of the dust. And we think, yeah, but he's God, and he was kind of doing his God work magic thing, whatever that means. But what's interesting actually is when you begin to read the Old Testament, the Hebrew word that's used to describe the kind of work that God is doing is the same word that they used for just good old ordinary human work. Dirty work, everyday work, sweaty, exhausting manual labor on the behalf of other people. And honestly, this is extraordinary. I don't want you to miss how big this is, because all of the surrounding cultures, for all of human history, all of the religions had a creation story just like the Jews did, just like in the Old Testament. But in every other one of them, they all described their gods as seeing work as beneath them. And so that's a big reason why in those creation stories, why they created humans. Because they wanted them to be slave labor, right? To do the work for them that they didn't want to do, so that the gods could do what the gods ought to do, which is just kind of sit around and do nothing and lounge around and take it easy. But the God of the scriptures could not be more different. According to him, there's a dignity and even a blessing in work. Every culture on earth wrestles with the question, if God came into the world, what would he be like? And for the Greeks, he would have been a philosopher king. And for the Romans, he would have been a noble statesman. But the God of the scriptures shows up in the Old Testament as a gardener and in the New Testament as a carpenter. And he's willing to do anything that helps humanity thrive and flourish, no matter how small or simple or mundane or dirty or challenging or lowly or unseen or uncelebrated. And what's crazier is he doesn't just do it, he enjoys it. And so here's the point of all of this. Even on our best days, we often see our work, or we often see work as a necessary evil. But when you begin to read the scriptures according to God, that's not it at all. He created you and I in such a way that work isn't a necessary evil. It's actually a necessity for your good, and it's deeply spiritual. And he looks at you and he looks at me and he says, you are made in my image. And so you'll be most fulfilled when you do what I do, when you do what I've done. So join me and let's make something of the world, little by little, day by day, one small task after another. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9 in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul is sort of wrestling with all these concepts, and he writes these words. He says, we are God's co-workers in service. And this isn't an isolated verse. All over the New Testament, God refers to us as his co-workers. We're not his slaves. We're not even his employees. We're his co-workers. And this is incredibly profound, because it means that no matter what you're doing, why you're doing it is so much bigger and deeper and more important than you can possibly imagine. It also explains that when you know why you're doing it, the what becomes infinitely more impactful and meaningful. See, in our culture, we're obsessed with finding the right what, right? We're obsessed with what do you do and what am I going to do? What are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do when you graduate? What are you going to do for money? But even when we think we've found it, we're answering the wrong question. I've known so many people who've gotten hung up on the what of their life. They're miserable in their job. And so they think if they could just get that other job at that other place with a little bit more money, that they'd be set and they'd be happy. But then they actually do get that other job at that other place with a little bit more money, and they hate it just as much, or they hate it even more. Why? What's going on there? Well, it's because they don't realize that joy and meaning and purpose are far more a product of why you're doing something than they are what you're doing. And it's not even close. And I want stuff, so I have to work to get money so I can buy stuff is a really bad why. Now, I don't know about you, but I love all of the language that God uses when he gives the original job description to Adam and Eve in the garden. He's like filling the earth and governing and reigning. Like, I'm like, yeah, I want that job. I was created to reign over something. But let me show you what it looked like in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. It says the Lord God, this is right after he says all that. So the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. Wait. So governing the earth, reigning over creation, partnering with God to bring order out of the chaos and take the world somewhere, it looks like working and caring for a garden. See, it's not that what you do doesn't matter, but when you know why, all of a sudden you're not just tending a garden or cleaning a bathroom or flipping burgers or selling real estate or cleaning houses or teaching or pastoring or even raising kids and doing laundry. No. You're co-creating a better world with God. In the end, the way we do the work that's right in front of us is an expression of how alive our souls are, or how much we've allowed ourselves to be deadened over time. There's so much conversation in our culture about passions and gifts and talents and desires and intelligence and what you're good at and what you were made for. And I love all that. In fact, honestly, I think part of what I'm created to do, part of my life's work, one of the things I love is helping people discover what they're passionate about, helping people discover what they are gifted to do. I think all of that stuff is hugely important, and we're actually going to get into some of it next week. But purpose and fulfillment and meaning, they actually begin when we aim at the bullseye that God created for us when it comes to our work. There's one last piece to this whole puzzle that I want to give you. And maybe you've experienced this, because the reality is, even when we get to the right why, even when we are doing somewhat that makes us really happy and we feel like we're making a difference, right? And our work is making the world better, we still don't love every minute of it, right? Like I could not love pastoring anymore. Like, I really believe, I've believed since I was 12 years old that it's what I was created to do. It's something I cannot believe that I actually get to spend my life doing this and they pay me money to do it. Like, I love being a pastor and leading a church and loving people and helping people discover. But there are all kinds of things and all kinds of moments about what I do that are just not my favorite. I don't love every second of it. It's still stressful and exhausting and annoying sometimes. And so what's the deal with that? I mean, if our work is a gift from God, why would it be like that? Well, because there's more to the story in the book of Genesis. When sin entered the world, things got all messed up, and God actually uses the word curse. And this is what he says in Genesis chapter 3. He says, "And he said to the woman, I will sharpen the pain of your pregnancy, and in pain you will give birth, and you will desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you." That one sentence, I think, explains so much about marital problems and relationship problems. You will desire to control him, and he's going to just run over you. That was worth coming today. We could close right there. Verse 17, to the man he said, Since you listened to your wife and you ate from the tree whose fruit I commanded you not to eat, the ground is cursed because of you, and your life, all your life, you will struggle to scratch a living from it. So Adam and Eve could not have possibly grasped or understood all of the fallout and all of the consequences of their actions. They could not understand. And so God is trying to help them begin to wrap their minds around what's going to happen as a result. And so to Eve, he's like, you're going to have some pain and struggle in your family relationships. There's just no way around that. Also, childbirth is not going to be super fun. And to Adam, though, he's like, you're going to have a lot of pain and frustration in your work life. And so God's looking at them, and he's looking particularly at Adam and talking about work, and he's going, it's just not going to be easy. It's going to be exhausting. You're going to have to fight through obstacles. There's going to be times where it literally feels like you're scratching out a living. You're barely making it. And even when you actually fight through and get to the other side, there's going to be things about the results that you just can't control. There's going to be unintended consequences. And he's going, but I made you for good and for meaningful work, but now it's going to be hard and it's going to hurt sometimes. In short, he's saying, you're going to have a complicated relationship with work. But let me show you what God is wanting for you in your life. So there's this moment in the first few chapters of Genesis that gets repeated over and over and over again. As God is working and he's creating, each day he steps back and he looks at what he did and he says to himself, that is good. And when he's all done, he steps back and he looks at all of it after he created Adam and he says, that is very good. And there's so much depth and nuance to him actually doing this. I mean, in one way, he's describing that what he's made is actually an extension or a reflection of himself. Because the truth is, no matter who you are, no matter what you do in your life, whether it's to earn money or not, your work will always be a reflection of you. You will only ever put out into the world what's already inside of you, because the material that you use to create a life, to do your work, is actually the material of what's going on in your soul. What God made was good because he is good. But then there's also this sense that when he says it's good, that he's expressing this deep sense of satisfaction, of fulfillment, of acknowledging what he's done and the investment that he's made, and that it was all worthwhile. Which is honestly what we're all longing for when it comes to our work, right? Like that money is important and it's necessary, but it can never buy you that life satisfaction in your life. It can never buy that kind of meaning and purpose and deep fulfillment that's only found when we step into the work that God has given us to do. See, that's what God wants for you. Not doing it for the paycheck, not dreading Mondays, not limiting the work that he's given you to do to the job that you have, but that you can actually lean into and put the best of yourself into making the world and life for the people around you better. And so what if it was possible? This is the question we're asking all through this series. What if it's possible for us to adjust our thoughts and our framework around what actually is work, why it matters, why God has given it to us? What if it was possible that you could step back at the end of each day and the work you've done, whether it was at your job or not, no matter how much money you make, no matter what your role or title or your job is, no matter if it's the work that your parents or grandparents wanted for you when they were dreaming about you as a kid, no matter if your boss, your actual boss at your work is a jerk or you don't love your work environment, what if you could just step back every single day and say, that is good, maybe even very good, because I'm partnering with God and I'm spending myself to help the world and the people around me thrive and flourish. And it's not perfect, and the job is still left undone, and there's more to do, but my part matters. Can I tell you that when that happens, you will stop just living for the weekends and for time off and for vacations? Because the truth is, you don't actually have to hate going to work no matter what your job is. Because that job is not just a job that you're doing to get some money so that you can buy stuff. It's part of the work that God has given you to do in the world. So I was at that collection agency, absolutely miserable. I'd been there for about a month, and I spent all day, every day on the phone getting lied to and yelled at by people who are just in the worst way in their lives, and they did not want to talk to me. And we were a part of teams. There's 6 or 8 people on my team, and it was probably the most cutthroat, competitive environment because all of the pay was on, not on commission, but on incentives and how much you were able to collect. And so literally until someone made a payment, I could call them and make an arrangement for them to pay, but until they paid, somebody else could call them and get more money out of them and steal the deal and actually get credit for it. And so it was, even though we had a team, there wasn't a lot of teamwork. It was very competitive. But I just decided I wasn't going to be like that. And so people would hit my auto dialer and I'd call, and there was an arrangement already made by somebody who I work with. And I could have stolen the sale, but I just decided not to. I just decided that I was just going to be a good teammate. And it didn't take very long for that to stick out. At first, people were like, "You're an idiot. I don't know why you don't understand how this job works." But then people started to come around and go, "Hey, what's going on with you?" One of them happened to find out what I normally do for a living. And so in our little team, I became the Rev. And it wasn't very long after that one of the young moms and one of the lonely single guys in our group started hitting me up on breaks and on lunch and asking me to pray for them, picking my brain about God and faith and truth. And I remember, still with all of that happening, hating being there. And then one day it just dawned on me, oh, this is the job, but this is my work. Oh, this is why I'm here. Because that single mom was feeling really hopeless. This is why I'm here. And so the question becomes, when it comes to our work, how do you experience more of the blessing and less of the curse in your day-to-day life? And that's what the rest of this series is about. And so here's the assignment for you for this week. That every single day you would try to answer this question. What are 2 or 3 ways for the work that I'm doing, whether it's at your job or it's with your family or in some other arena of your life, what are 2 or 3 ways that your work can partner with God for the flourishing and the benefit of people around you? When you begin to tap into that, it is a game changer. Let's pray together.